Have you ever lived in a haunted house? God, who has time for that? Honestly, personal experience, I lived in this house in my basement, was telling a ghost story to friends, and suddenly the TV just turned off. Pretty creepy. If you guys want to know more about it, go to listen to my podcast. I talked about it. But these 6 subscribers, with their names popping up, like this, probably should be popping up right now. Thank you guys so much. Your names were really hard to remember, hence this. Anyways, this is called the March edition because these are the best ghost stories of haunted houses from March. We're doing another 6 stories in April, so if you have your own true scary ghost stories you think would make the list, send it to me now before April ends. Without further ado, grab a blanket, turn off your lights for 6 true scary ghost stories from my subscribers when they lived in friggin' a haunted house, man. My ghost experience. Alright, I know this is not a ghost story in the woods, but creepy nonetheless. I'm a 25-year-old female from Germany, and when this happened, I was about 15 years old. Next to my house where I lived was an abandoned house. The previous owner was moved out by his family because he was very old, and so was his house, worn out and dangerous. I used to sneak through the stables, into the garden, and through the kitchen back door, which had a hole in it. The house was very dirty inside. The windows were boarded up downstairs, and some doors as well. The furniture was still there, but it looked like it had seen better days. Sometimes I went alone, sometimes with my best friend. One day, I went in with 2 female friends to play a game. It's called Glassback, which is like Ouija board. I prepared pieces of paper with letters from A to Z and numbers from 0 to 9 and put them in a circle on the table in the small living room. I also brought some candles and a glass, which I put in the middle. The window to the living room was boarded up, and the only light we had was from my candles and some light coming through the door from the kitchen windows. It was the middle of the day. We sat down at the table and started to play, asking the usual questions like, is somebody there? How old are you? How did you die? And stuff like that. Of course, nothing happened. But to scare my friends, I kept moving the glass with my finger, pretending I'm not moving it. I just made up answers. They thought there was a ghost named Sarah who died in a fire. It scared them, and they ran into the kitchen. I laughed and followed, telling them the truth. Of course, they were a bit angry, but we laughed about it. Suddenly, a crashing sound came from the living room, and my friends screamed and booked it outside really fast. Since I don't scare that easily, I went back to investigate and saw that the armchair had flown from one side of the room to the other into the cabinet. Like I said, the room was very small, and we were all alone inside the house. I checked the upstairs and downstairs. Before we started playing, there was no way to hide in the living room. We were just in there a few seconds before it crashed. I suddenly was very scared because there was no sign of someone else being inside the house. A cold chill ran down my spine and I ran. I squeezed myself as fast as I could through the hole in the kitchen door and yelled at my friends, "Go, go, go!" who had been waiting in the garden for me. We all screamed, went back through the stables, and ran back to my house. My parents were home, and I told them what happened. My father said he was the one throwing the armchair, but that wasn't possible. We were alone in the house. I checked. Also, my father is 6'1" and weighs 275 pounds that time. He was way too big to fit through the hole in the door. I'm 5'5" and was just a little chubby, and I already had trouble fitting in. So, what was inside the house? Who or what threw the armchair? I never went back inside there again. 2 years later, the house was removed. I moved out last year, and since then, there was nothing. But I still get a strange feeling whenever I think about it. The house on Buttonwood Street. Let me start off by saying that my family has a history with spirits, and my grandparents have a lot to tell about one of their houses that they lived in, which was so severely haunted that the people who lived on the street nicknamed it the Seventh Gate to Hell. The house was one of the oldest on the block, and my grandparents, being a young couple with kids, weren't able to afford much better than a creaky old building. From what they told me, they noticed little things at first, like how my grandpa's tools would disappear whenever he was working on something, and then reappear in a completely different location. Obviously, they blamed this on my mom and aunts since they were little kids. However, this persisted in parts of the house where my mom and aunts were too scared to go to, such as the basement. Another creepy experience my grandpa had with the basement was when it flooded. When he went down there to see how bad it was, he saw that the center of the room was bubbling, as if the water was either boiling hot or if it was draining. When the water cleared and he went back to check the floor, it was solid concrete. It took a big fight between him and grandmother to find out how haunted the house really was. One day, they had such a bad fight that my gran drove off somewhere, while he went to the backyard to smoke. When he came back inside and went to his room, he found that his work clothing had been shredded. If Gran had drove back to tear them up, he would have heard their car, and they didn't have any cats to do that. My mom and aunt were also at school, so neither of them could have done it. He grabbed his katana, he owned an impressive sword collection then, and marched throughout the house in case someone had snuck in, but nobody was there. If they escaped, he would have heard the door or the windows open. Later that night, they were fighting again, and the mirror on their dresser, which they were at least 6 feet away from, shattered, along with their shelf falling from the wall. My grandmother, being the spiritual one due to being Native American, knew right away that they were dealing with spirits, the kind that reacted to negative things. It would be a few more years until anything horrifying happened again, starting with my mom and aunts messing around with a Ouija board and other occult things. One day they were sitting in the room with their grandfather, Pup Cheeseman, and there was an argument between my aunts when suddenly ashtrays started to fly off the coffee table, and figurines on the mantle were flying too, and the shutters started slamming down and the windows rattling. My aunts and grandparents were terrified at this point, and Pop Cheeseman, bless his little heart, had enough of this and screamed at the spirits to knock it off. And to their surprise, they stopped fighting, and my grandpa said that the room had a flowery smell to it. Grandpa Cheeseman later told him that 2 spirits were fighting, a good one and a bad one, and that the good one won. The other encounters weren't as horrifying as that. One of my aunts had a nice spirit in her room, which she called Timothy, who she said stood over her at night and protected her. Timothy was a really nice spirit and would always keep her calm. Then, when Mom got pregnant with me and had me, that's when some of the creepy stuff started happening. Mom said that I had a little friend, Emily, who I would talk to in the playroom. She thought she was an imaginary friend, until she caught me near the window. Apparently, I told her that Emily wanted me to follow her, and that's when Mom grabbed me and took me out of that room. Another time, my grandpa told me that there was a bad spirit that I had seen, which still gives me shivers. By that point, they had put up crosses on the doorways, and he told me that I asked him to take them down so the man could come into the room. He looked over to where I was pointing, and he saw a man dressed in dark clothing and hat. He actually saw the spirit standing there at the door. As you can tell, I wasn't left alone much after that, considering a spirit manifested itself into a physical form for anyone to see. A spirit that potentially wanted to harm us. It was not safe in that house, but my grandparents could not afford to move. When I was 6 years old, Mom and Dad had moved to Alabama and took me with them, and my grandparents were able to move to a new house. Grandpa said a Romanian priest had bought it and went inside to check it. The priest walked right back out of the house and said that the place had too many bad spirits. and to this day the house sits condemned on Buttonwood Street. We visited that house recently, and I was taking pictures of it. I remember being right up front, while my dad stayed back with the car so nobody was with me. When we got home, we checked the images on the computer, and I remember having gotten a couple of shots out of the same window, and the second one made my blood run cold. There was a face in the window, peering out at me. Ghost story, long one. I hope this is something you are looking for, but please don't use my name or email, thank you. The house in Damascus. When I was younger, just about to turn into a teenager, my family and I moved to a small town in Virginia, Damascus, not far from Abington. We were a big family, needed a bigger home. Well, we found one, but apparently other things resided there. Some seemed not to care, others did. The house was a 2-story house, but apparently it was bigger in the years prior. But I will get into that later. Downstairs, as you came in through the front door from the porch, you had the stairs directly straight, master bedroom to the left, living room to the right. Past the living room through an open doorway, you had the dining room, bathroom to the left of that. Passing the dining room, through another open doorway was the kitchen. To the right was the pantry, and back door that led to the back porch. Upstairs, hallway with 2 bedrooms, one to the right, one straight ahead. But there were 2 areas upstairs that had space available to be converted to bedrooms. One area was, the other area was left alone. Of all the time spending there, we only opened the door to this other area, not really entered it. We just left it alone for some odd reason. My siblings and I were into adventures, always getting into something or another, but this room we left alone. The other area was converted from a storage area to a bedroom. Lucky for me, I got to sleep in it first. The room was not as well insulated as the other rooms in the house, but I had the warmest blanket in the house, so comfy too, and a little heater to boot. But I kept waking up with chills, goosebumps, someone or something staring at me. I wrote it off, probably my imagination or my stepbrothers. Again and again, I awakened to these chills, to the staring feeling, but now I feel hostility towards me. Something in this room wants to hurt me, and I don't think it's my stepbrothers. I grew up with superstitions. We knew there were other things in this world. My grandma, may she rest in peace, did things that could not be explained. Some refer to her as a bruja, witch, but a good one. Anyways, we knew that other things exist. One of those things was in here with me and wanted to harm me. I had balls as a kid, but not that night. I fled out of that room. I went into the next room, shoved my brother over, didn't care if I woke him or not, and never slept in that room on my own again. My second incident in that house was, I thought, a prank by one of my siblings. At the time, there were 6 others, so I figured it was one of them, except the 2 younger than me. I was making my way to the bathroom. The only light was coming from underneath the bathroom floor. We had a big dining room table, and I stopped at the doorway between the dining room and the living room, for it seemed that someone was at the opposite end of the dining room table. A black-on-black figure sitting there looking at me, just sitting there looking. I didn't get any feeling from it, which is probably why I thought it was one of my siblings. So I went to the other end to see who it was. I wish I hadn't. There was nothing. There was nothing there. The shadow figure disappeared. I didn't know what to make of it or how to react, besides thinking, goddamn house. My last solo incident in that house was going to see what my mom was cooking in the kitchen. I wasn't really paying attention as I was walking until I got to the open doorway between the dining room and kitchen. There standing were 2 kids, boy and a girl. Girl was older than the boy. He was wearing overalls, for she was helping him with it, to buckle the part that goes over the shoulder. I froze. They stopped and looked at me. Yes, They looked at me. But then they were gone, just like that, gone. My mom didn't see anything. Her back was turned towards the doorway. She was cooking, of course. When you need a witness, life makes sure you don't have one. I wasn't the only one to experience things in that house. Family members heard footsteps on the stairs or upstairs hallway. Items would go missing, the usual creepy ghost stuff. Except 2 incidences that I was a witness to. The first was being upstairs listening to the radio on a Friday. It was a request and dedication night. I can't remember the actual tune, but I know we all freak out when radio cut out brief static. Then, a weird deep voice came on. It seemed to be saying something, but we had no idea what the hell it was. It lasted for several seconds. Then it went back to static, then the music returned, scared the shit out of us. We thought we might have recorded on tape. Yes, tape, but nothing was there but a blank spot. The other scared me more than the others. It happened to my younger sister. She could have gotten really hurt. How she didn't is beyond me. She was standing by the stairs, closing the front door. The bottom was wood, the top was glass. As the door closed, the glass shattered inwards towards my sister. The door closed from the inside, so the glass should have gone outwards towards the porch, not inward, not toward my sister. She screamed. I was coming from upstairs, can't remember who was in the living room, but everybody who was home came running to see what was going on. They saw the glass. My sister was rushed upon by family members, but she was okay. No idea how the glass missed her. She was safe. We were all scared shitless by that incident. Earlier, when I said the house was bigger, there used to be a cellar. It was closed off, but we learned of it when I had to crawl under the house. Can't remember why I crawled under the house, but I found a shovel and a Matex on top of a mound. I came in through the front porch, but exited through the back part of the house. My siblings were surprised that I came out on that end. I let them know what I found. Of course, we all assume dead body buried. We also found a door that held old canned goods that have gone bad, really bad. No one took the dare to try one. Why was this part of the house closed off? We never learned. For those that are curious, one of the things my grandma did was cut the sky to make it stop raining. She would get 2 sharp objects, usually knives, go outside, point the knives towards the sky like she's cutting it. Not sure what she was saying though, but it would stop raining. Ghost story. Hey, I've been thinking of submitting my story for quite some time, but I never did. That is, until I saw your video and I'm here to help. So here goes nothing. I want to start out by saying that I am not a good storyteller, so forgive me if I jump around in the story. Anyways, this is the story of my house I lived in from the age 12 to 16. I recently moved and thank God for this. A lot has happened in this house, but this one is the scariest one. It didn't really happen to me though, but it has stuck with me since I got it told. My stepdad is a big guy, about 6'6" and 330 pounds. He doesn't scare easily and would usually tell me and my mom we were crazy for claiming the house was haunted. Still to this day, he is afraid to admit it. Anyways, my stepdad got woken up by the feeling that somebody was watching him. At this time, I would do weird things like that to wake them up, just stare at them till they woke up, so he just assumed it was me. So he asked, "Hey, what's wrong?" And I said nothing. I just kept looking down. He couldn't see my face because my hair was covering my face. He asked again, "Is there something wrong? Are you hungry?" And I just turned around and slowly walked out of the room into the hallway. He got up to look where I was going, but I was gone. He went back to sleep. It's about 5 a.m. at this point. Cut back to me. I woke up at 11 a.m. after a good night's sleep. I didn't usually sleep this much, but it felt good, so I wasn't questioning it. My stepdad went up to me and said, "You were up early this morning, huh?" And I was like, "No, I just woke up." And as soon as I said that, the light in his eyes just disappeared. I said, What's wrong?" And then he explained the story to me. After we talked about it, he noticed that the girl was wearing a white dress, and I did not have a white dress. Also, to anyone thinking this somehow could have been me sleepwalking, I've never been sleepwalking, and I don't think that it would be possible in any way. A little background information about the house that we found afterwards by our neighbors. It was the main house in World War II, used by the top soldiers in our town. We live in Denmark. They had their base there and covered the windows with black plastic bags. When it wasn't used in World War II, it was a home to a rich family with lots of maids. Every maid had a driver, and one of the maids had an affair with her driver. The girl got pregnant and told the man. He was furious. He was already married. He murdered her in our backyard. Ghost story. If you do actually take the time to read this, thank you. I've been watching your videos for about a year now and wanted you to know my story. I'm a 17-year-old guy and my family moved 4 times in 15 years. The first house I remember living in was an old rickety, worn-down farmhouse. We lived there until I was 8 years old. Within that house was definitely more than one ghost. I did not have my first encounter until I was about 5 or 6. You'll have to forgive my faded recollection. It was a long time ago. It was the first night my twin brother and I got a bunk bed. We fought over the top bunk and I won. I woke up in the middle of the night, sweaty from a nightmare. And the fact that the top bunk was always hot, I sat up and calmed down. For reasons unknown, I looked out my door and saw something go in our older brother's room. His room was perpendicular to ours, so I can see the door. I couldn't make it out yet because I was still groggy. But it was like a white blob slid into his room. My sister said that she saw a young boy in her closet when she was combing her hair. She saw him peel around the corner through the reflection of her mirror. My mom said she heard native chanting while sweeping the kitchen. This was when all of us kids were at school and daycare. We were eating one day. My dad had his back to the dining room window, and underneath the window was a deep freeze. Big rectangular freezer box if you didn't know. Our mom had bought a few candles the other night, since the house smelled at points at night. My twin brother Zach was having a fit about the food. He was sitting on the other end of the table, but on the left side. He started to raise hell, and one of the candles on the deep freeze flew past my dad's head and came short to hitting my brother. During our last month living there, our parents openly admitted to use a Ouija board in the house. My dad said the remote was being thrown and so were scissors. He didn't know what to do, so he took the board out back and burnt it. We moved across the state to a place that used to be a town, but only had the house, a barn for our horses, an abandoned schoolhouse, and a church. People still went to the church, and the only thing that I feared were rattlesnakes, even though I didn't ever see any. I did find a small slab in front of a big pile of rocks and a bunch of cement. The only thing on the slab was the letter M. This kind of freaked me out, and my mom didn't know what to think of it. About a year later, my oldest sister moved out, and my other sister took her old room. I moved into my sister's room because I didn't feel like sharing a room with Zach anymore. I only stayed in that room for about 6 months. It was a room in the basement. The walls were cement and had chalk drawings of a target. They were already there when we moved in. Anyways, whenever I slept in that room, I felt like someone was staring at you. A few months after that, my older brother, my older sister, Zach, and I decided to play Ghost in the graveyard. My brother was it, and my sister and I hid in a bush by the garage. My sister was too cramped, so she moved. I saw her hide behind a tree that was in the perfect view from my spot. I saw my brother chase after Zach. They ran from my vision left to right soon after. I saw a girl walk from the direction they ran. She wasn't my sister. This girl wore glasses, had pigtails or twin tails, however you call it. She was holding a few books too. She casually walked from my right to my left. I believe that she used to go to that schoolhouse near the church. It was the 100th anniversary of when our place was made. Turns out that it did in fact used to be a small town, but there was a fire that burnt down a lot of houses. Since there were larger towns not so far away, people didn't really rebuild much of the property besides of what was there. That would explain the burnt wood in the schoolhouse. We moved to the town where we went to school when I was 11. This house was up on a hill with a big field, ideal for our horses. We didn't quite have everything moved, so my brother and I slept in the house while my sister and parents slept in our previous house. Zach and I still shared a room only because there weren't enough for everyone to have their own room anyways. Our beds were just a single mattress on the floor, and they took up the majority of the room. First night we slept there was fine. I woke up around 7 to something moving on my blankets. I felt like someone had sat down, but I just figured it was our dog trying to get comfortable because he likes to sleep between people's legs. I moved my legs a bit, but didn't feel anything on my bed. I was kind of freaking out at this point, and I looked over my leg and saw absolutely nothing but an indent, like someone had indeed sat on my mattress. I rolled over to Zach's mattress, and he had never saw me so frickin' scared. We moved into our 4th house a year after that. This time, it was a house in town. It used to be a bed and breakfast, a very small one. It only had 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a shack that was also like a room. Zach and I took a look in our room with our mom and thought it was pretty nice. The beds were actual beds and not mattresses. We left and shut the door to move the rest of the stuff. Not 20 minutes later, we enter the room again and everything is covered in dust. The TV, the windowsill, the nightstand, and even the beds. It looked like it hadn't had a proper cleaning in a decade. Before you ask, the windows and vents were not open. Other than that incident, the only abnormal thing was our vacuum cleaner tipping over at random times. When I was 15, we moved mid-state into a nice home my dad used as a break spot whenever he'd go tricking. I currently live here now, and there hasn't been much activity. The only thing I couldn't explain was when I was about to play PlayStation, I heard someone in my room sneeze. I was home alone. Ghost Story Submission. Hello Horror Studio 1. I've been a fan of your videos for over a year now, and I've seen some ghost and specter encounters that I want to share with you and hopefully with the rest of YouTube as well. They are kind of long and I apologize in advance. You can pick either story or both if you want. This happened when I was in 3rd grade. I was living with my parents, sisters, and my uncle in Irvine at the time. We had a landlord named Mr. Gans, and he committed suicide a few weeks after renting the house to us. A few months into our move, weird things started happening in mine and my sister's room. In the middle of the night, nearly every night, my joystick would move by itself, the computer would turn off and on by itself, and the entrance to our room would get icy cold. I was told about Mr. Gan's suicide after I told my mom about the strange occurrences happening in my room. When we moved out of the house a year later, my dad and I were in the garage loading up boxes in the moving truck. We heard constant loud banging upstairs. Nobody was in the house at the time. My mom and sisters were in the new house and my uncle was at work. The banging noise persisted as we loaded the last of our things and left the house for good. In 2008, I moved into the house that my sister and my dad currently live in. I had just moved out on my own in October 2016. We had a next-door neighbor named Alex. He was a nice, friendly guy, and his sons were friends with me and my sister. Well, a few years later, my mom, stepdad, and half-brother go to stay with Alex for a while. My brother has always been a peculiar child. Even for a 4-year-old, he's 12 now. But he swore up and down that house was haunted. He told me that he had a dream about cop cars and ambulances coming to Alex's house and how a man was shot there. Not too long after, my brother insisted on staying at my dad's house instead. When asked why, he said, "A man in a hat tried to hurt me. He pushed my head down." We didn't think much of it until Alex's 20-year-old niece had a sleep paralysis episode very similar to my brother's encounter. My sister and I went to join my mom in investigating the house. My sister said she saw a pale, grungy young man in the game room. He was about 19 years old, black hair, reddish-brown eyes, white shirt with a big gunshot wound. And according to my mom, he hates getting his picture taken. She likes to take photos of ghosts. We found a weird stain on the floor behind the chair and a faint handprint on the wall. We asked Alex about this, but he swore he never noticed. After Alex moved out, there have been many neighbors coming in and out of this house. We were going to warn them, but I'm not sure how much they'd believe us. This is more of a demon story than a ghost story, but I thought I'd throw it out there anyways. This happened last year. I was in a relationship with someone and he was not out for my best interests. He spoke of a girl that follows him wherever he goes. I told him that is no good and you need to separate yourself from her, and he refused to listen. Fast forward a month and he tells me he got rid of her, but it isn't clear how. I come home from school later that night and my little brother and I are talking in the kitchen, and suddenly he goes pale in the face and his head slowly follows something down the corridor. He whispers, "A girl just walked in here." I asked him what she looks like and he replied, "She's blonde. She has a red eye and a blue eye, and she's wearing a dirty white dress." I am confused, but my brother insisted on sleeping in my sister's room because he was so scared. That night, I had a nightmare where I found a scribbled black and red sketch of a giant shadowy entity. I flipped over the paper and scribbled in the pencil over and over again is the phrase, "I don't want to hear the whispers anymore." I woke up, but I didn't think much of it. Since that night, I always felt watched every time I was home. The next night, I had another nightmare, but this time, my boyfriend at the time and I were talking in the living room. We hear some ruckus in the guest room, so we both get up to investigate. Inside the room were 3 dark, scribbly entities, much like the one in the drawing, except that it looked like they were made out of electricity. The 3 entities saw us and came at us whispering violently. They killed us in the dream, and then I woke up. I was really adamant on cleansing the house, so I saged the entire downstairs and went back to sleep. The next night, after saging the rest of the house, I had my third and final nightmare. I was sitting at the table eating and my sister's laptop was open and running. I looked at it, and it started to type by itself. It said, "Please stop the torment." And I said, "What do you mean?" And it said, "Stop tormenting me." In the dream, I felt eyes burning in the back of my skull. I turned around to see the girl my brother saw coming towards me. I woke up but refused to turn around because I knew she was there, even if it was for a few seconds. After that, I never saw her or felt her presence again.